Good evening, church. A variation on Luke 24, a story you may know as the walk to Emmaus. They buried Jesus, but didn't realize he was a seed. On the third day, a vine burst through the soil, alive and ready for a whole new thing. That vine, named Jesus, ran into the world. On a road to Emmaus, passing two discouraged disciples who felt the movement was done, it had flatlined, that Jesus wasn't the one after all, even though the women who had done the heavy lifting told them how it truly was. Jesus called the disciples out for being so slow of heart and recounted the whole story of faith from the beginning. It was a long enough story that the Emmaus roadies felt they needed to provide a meal for this stranger. And it wasn't until that stranger broke and blessed and gave them the bread that they realized it was Jesus. They were stoked to say the least. The true vine in their presence, and so beyond eager, they branched out from there. A vine story for the beautiful branches in the house tonight. Thanks be to God. Friends, we're all in this together, right? I mean, it is Tuesday in July in Des Moines. You're not here by accident. So let's be in this thing together. After all, I get it, right? As I'm here to talk about the future of the church, I'm not really the one to talk about the future of the church. I'm a cisgender, straight, white male. My pronouns are he, him, his. The future of the church is way more colorful and expansive than that. Can I get an amen? Okay, so you are with me on this. I'm going to need some help this evening. I always wanted to claim an acronym that caught on if Gary Busey can do it, who was a Tulsa-raised disciple, by the way. I figure the acronym movement is up for grabs, okay? So not to be confused with DMB, which may be Dave Matthews Band, or PBR, which is, I just got to know what kind of crowd we got here tonight. Our acronym for the moment, which you can dump when we're done here if it is not your flavor, is DBR. Death, burial, resurrection. It's hashtagable perhaps, and so we can feel the power of DBR tonight. I am asking for your help. Now, starting over here in this section, if you're on this side of the table and up here in this lovely section here, you are going to be death. There's nothing personal. You seem like a lovely section, but somebody's got to carry the load. Now this fine section over here, all the way to the back, you're going to be burial. My condolences. But we need you to own this part. Those of you in this section here in the middle, all the way to the back, you're going to be resurrection. Right? And you're already excited about your part, I can tell. Now, when I point to your section, if you would be so kind to represent your word by saying it out loud in unison and bring a little feeling with it, if you would. And if I give you a big gesture, now I know I'm in trouble already, could you bring it back to me with some heat? And if I'm a little gentle or somber, maybe you could match that spirit too. We're going to try this, okay? Are we ready? Death, you ready? All right. DBR. Let's do this sermon thing. So you are going to launch it for us, okay? Death, burial, rigor mortis. Now wait a minute, right? That's not the R that we agreed on. Rigor mortis, it's the third stage of death, you know? It's the worst, or so I can imagine. The joints and the muscles stiffen. I told it's a process that lasts 1 to 4 days. And the Emmaus story in Luke's gospel falls on the third day following the death, burial of Jesus. But Jesus is up. He's been raised. But that rigor mortis is no joke. The text says that he comes upon a couple of people on the road to Emmaus from Jerusalem, which is a 7-mile stretch. So we know that the first thing that Jesus did after the resurrection was to go for a little run. And how do you shake off the rigor mortis rust, right? You stretch really well, You do a few lunges. You fire up your motivational playlist on your phone to go for a run, Work out the stiffness. Can you imagine Jesus' playlist? Let's call it, friends, the playlist. Maybe a little Jason Isbell, a little Sasha Fierce, a little Lauren Daigle's Still Rolling Stones, perhaps. Maybe DOC's own J Quest, right? I woke up, had to make the playlist. And so Jesus runs up on these two slow-moving, gloomy disciples pretty fast, hollering, on your right, on your right. Because, I'm guessing Jesus' pace is at about a 7-minute mile on a shakeout run. But as he passes, he can tell that they're having some heated fellowship, some intensity in their conversation. And so he pulls out his earbuds and he starts pacing backwards as he's facing them in conversation. He says, what's the gloom all about? Now they're a little annoyed with this runner who clearly is out of the loop. They say, man, have you been living under a rock, dude? He just kind of smirks and nods his head a bit, right? That's pretty much the case for a couple of days. And so they hit him with the news, right? Are we ready? Jesus the Nazarene. We thought that he was the one, but it's been 3 days, rigor mortis and all. Sometimes I think that's how we feel about the church. We thought we had something going, but we're living in that third stage of death. Things getting a little stiff around here. I've likened it to Dippin' Dots, the ice cream of the future. The Dippin' Dots have been the ice cream of the future since 1988. But that future never quite takes. They're still saying it, but Dippin' Dots are mostly that thing you get in a little plastic baseball helmet for $8 at a minor league baseball game. Now, if Dippin' Dots is a sponsor of this here General Assembly, I need you to know that I love Dippin' Dots. But we've been saying this about the church for a while too. Our theology, we say, is the future. The millennials, Gen Y, Gen Z, we're with their jam, right? This inclusive, expansive theology grounded in the vine, hands-on, justice-oriented, all about the dialogue. Going to take off any time now. And we wait and we wait. And we talk and we talk. But we continue to serve up the church in minor league plastic dishes for $8. And we complain about it too. Because we have the answers, right? We just don't know why we're not getting the response that we're after. We wind up with that bitter communion face. All the while, Jesus is running up beside us, behind us, saying, on your left, on your left. He's wondering why we're so grumpy and judgmental of each other. And when Jesus gets in front of us and he's looking us in the eye, we say to him, man, are you the only one that hasn't heard? Mainline movement is dead. The disciples of Christ, we thought that's where it's at, but it's really all DBR, death, burial, rigor mortis. There may be some things that need to die. Our negativity may be chief among them. All that energy that is focused on division and our being consumed with death. We know the drive of this faith is all about life. The universe is rigged in our favor, friends. Love is this infinite resource. Running that Emmaus road, Jesus is sort of deadpanned at first, saying, seriously, guys, you're so slow of heart. And he goes back through the whole story of faith again, and along the way, he names Altoona Christian Church, and the church at Ankeny and Runnels and Marion and downtown Des Moines and West Des Moines and Wakanda Christian, the church at Bondurant, right? Talks about their passion, resurrection. He says, didn't you hear Sister Hale? Resurrection. He names V and Caroline and Aaron over at Week of Compassion. And he says, have you met the Bethany Fellows? Come on, fellows. Jesus tells them about Reverend Brian Adams. Now there's a Bethany Fellow. While serving Mount Rainier Christian Church, Brian was thrust in the middle of constant need. So many hurting people. Emma Lazarus' poem, known as the Statue of Liberty poem, it fit well Brian's call in this place. Bring me, you're tired, you're poor. And one such man named Michael walked into Brian's church one day. Now, Michael was street dependent, had his challenges, but Michael was a soon-to-be regular through Brian's church door. Been through a lot. He was looking for a little compassion. More on Michael in a minute. But my friend and colleague, Pastor Brian, he would often go to the park near the church. He would talk to the people who took residence on a bench, used a discarded newspaper as a bed sheet at night, and he would share food. He'd listen to their stories. He would value them. He would show them dignity and compassion. He could share with them, so he did. That was reason enough to share. It wasn't long, however, before Michael wanted to tag along. After all, these were people he understood. He was our evangelist, Brian said. And Michael would tag along with Brian, sharing the good news he was picking up in Brian's church and offering it to any who would listen. You know, it's not always easy to have a partner, but the church needs all of us, right? Brian welcomed him. He chose to see him as a brother, and it was a compassion ship that became a constant for a couple of years. Until the night Pastor Brian died in his sleep, 35 years old. No medical history. His wife, Emily, by his side. They married just a couple of years prior. She was with child, a baby girl, Sophia, due in short time. The day Brian was to be installed as a new pastor of a church he was so excited to serve near his hometown became the day the church laid him to rest. Turns out Brian had an enlarged heart. I don't know how all that works, but he's gone. And while it seems nobody knew about his condition, we all knew that he had a big heart. And there were many moving images from all that transpired after. Some 1,500 people waiting in line to share their condolences, people of all varieties and residences whom Brian had made room for in his life. But perhaps the most telling image of all, do you know who was right there to carry Brian's body to its final resting place? Michael. He was a pallbearer. Yes, there was. And there was. But relationships like that, resurrection. These partnerships and compationships, they turn brothers and sisters who carry one another. And this witness, it goes far beyond curriculum and trendy church growth tips and tricks, right? Solidarity seems to trump endless quests for solutions. I heard our GMP, one of my favorite acronyms. She preached in Oklahoma earlier this year. Terry's everywhere, by the way, right? Simply amazing. I be in her very presence in one moment. That evening on Facebook, she's in Puerto Rico. And the next night, she's at Phillips Theological Seminary to install the marvelous Reverend Dr. Nancy Pittman as the new president. Then she's at Bethany College. She's at this assembly. She's at your church. And here we are now. I think she may walk through locked doors. Just saying. But she said in that sermon that day, everyone's looking for the plan, for the goals, for the future. The solution, she said, is already marked in the heavens. We're looking for solidarity over solutions. See, the universe is rigged in our favor. Did I say that? Love is the infinite resource. You just have to tap into it. And so Jesus tells these faith stories from beginning to end, and those Emmaus road walkers were like, okay, we get it. You do know what's happening. Sorry we called you out on that. And feeling like they owed it, perhaps they invited him to have something to eat. Jesus accepts. And they wind up at the table where Jesus takes the bread, he blesses, he breaks, he gives. That's the pattern that is going to route our future disciples. Bless and break and give. It is the DBR rhythm. It is death, burial, resurrection. It's necessary to release at times some things to death, that we might be open to the new gift. Behold, I do a new thing, we preach. And some such implications are that we release some of the old things. And this new thing, it is around us, it is among us, it is within us. We're just too concerned about the dying part. But that just got to be given over to the burial section. We're missing the life that's all around us. You know, I get an email about once a week from my friend Mary Noble. And the strange thing is, I officiated Mary's memorial service last year. But the message says one simple thing every time: don't miss it, it says. And then there's a link to click. I've never clicked it. Not even once. People tell me it's spam, you know. And I get that, as Mary died over a year ago. She is in the resurrection now. But she is smiling, I know. She'd say that sort of thing to me all the time. Don't miss it, Mark. Don't miss what, Mary? DBR, death, burial. Jesus blesses the bread, and those at the table with him think, hold up. And then he breaks it, and they think, wait a minute. And then when he gives it, all of their questions were answered. It was Jesus. Not only did he know all of what had transpired, he is what transpired. And now they're the ones who are awakened. They're the ones who are running that Emmaus road. They're branching out from the vine. They're the ones who are spreading the word, saying he's still rolling stones. And they're not off telling people what they haven't seen or to complain about what didn't work or how the movement is trailing off to its own burial. No. They're off to share what they have seen, which is resurrection. What they have heard, resurrection. What they know to be true, resurrection. It's not all glamorous stuff. You know, what did Jesus do every time that he recognized he was the most powerful person in the room? He served. And when Mary's message hits my inbox and says, don't miss it, I stop and I think and I look and I listen. Where is it that I am to serve? What do I need to release that I might then bless it and give it? Whose voice needs to be lifted up? What bitterness needs to subside? What division needs to cease? What walls do we need to break down? And how can we change our table talk? Even at assembly, you know, when we meet up with our peers of choice for dinner, could we focus on the conversation of the building blocks of the church instead of our inclinations to critique or to get lost in the death and burial sense of it all? Friends, what if we could support the diverse colors of our future and celebrate it in all its forms and demonstrate to the rest of the world its beauty, because we know it when we see it? That authenticity, we just have to live it and raise it, to get behind it and offer it to the world as our offering that the movement isn't dying, she's just getting warmed up. Rigor mortis is the third stage of death, but it ain't the final stage. We can shake free. You know, one day this spring, I was having a social media post-worthy kind of day, and I don't post a whole lot. But it was one of those days, you know, where you post a picture of your office with the right balance of cleanliness, but some of your best commentaries and scribbled notes out on the table. So it looks like you're smart and you're working incredibly hard. And I was just checking boxes left and right that day. It was a good day, but I had this growing sense that I needed to call on my friend Peggy. Now, she's in her 90s. She is essentially the person that I want to be when I grow up. And I made the drive out to see her, and she glowed when I walked in the room. She always glows. And she's small and frail. She's not getting out of bed much these days. If there was a rocking chair, I think I could have cradled her in my arms and rocked her. And we greeted each other. We exchanged some of the usual pleasantries, and she was clearly tired. Her voice was faint. I promised that I wouldn't stay too long. She asked me if I would pray with her the Lord's Prayer. Of course, I said, and we held hands and we started right in. Now, I got to say, Peggy's not in my church. And we're relatively new friends. And so as we're praying the Lord's Prayer, I didn't know if we were debtors or trespassers or sinners or what we were. So we just plowed through that part. You know, it turns out we were a little bit of all of them. But we amended, and I turned to go. As I reached the door, she called to me, "Mark." "Yes, Peggy," I said. She said, "Did you see the daffodils on the hill as you drove in?" "Oh, I saw the daffodils." You couldn't miss the daffodils. Absolutely stunning. Now, knowing Peggy wasn't getting out of bed at all at this point, I was a little surprised that she had even mentioned it. And I asked her, "Hey, did someone, get you out to see them?" And she shook her head, "No." But she patted her heart as if to say, "I can see him." right here. She said, I used to walk out there each spring and sit on the bench among them and just soak it all in. And we hugged and I left. Now, I don't know how long it's been since she's actually laid eyes on those daffodils, but she'd seen them before. They were as vivid in her memory as anything she'd ever cherished. She wanted to make sure that I had seen it. She wanted to make sure that I didn't miss it. Friends, what is it that we want the world to see? What beauty do we celebrate that you have known of our movement of faith that you want to flourish forward? What do we have to release to make way for that vision? What do we need to bless and break and give in order that it's clear to the world that Jesus is still rolling stones in our midst? What gleam in our eye can bring hope, not doom and gloom, not death, not burial, not even rigor mortis, but my friends, resurrection. And let it begin with you. Let it begin with me. Let it begin with every hue, every stripe, every identity, every mouthpiece of justice that may spring forth from this assembly on a Tuesday night in July in Des Moines. Because hope is a group effort. And friends, are you ready for the last word of hope? Is always resurrection, resurrection. Everybody say it. Resurrection. Thanks be to God.